reading from Henry J.M. Newen from this month's Soul Matters packet. Compassion asks us to go where it hurts, to enter into the places of pain, to share in brokenness, fear, confusion, and anguish. Compassion challenges us to cry out to those in misery, to mourn with those who are lonely, to weep with those in tears. Compassion requires us to be weak with the weak, vulnerable with the vulnerable, and powerless with the powerless. Compassion means full immersion in the condition of being human. Compassion means full immersion in the condition of being human.
All of us longing for home. Compassion asks. It asks us to go where it hurts. Challenges us to cry with those in misery. To be weak with the weak. Vulnerable with the vulnerable, and powerless with the powerless. Compassion means full immersion in the condition of being human. The older I get, the more I understand these words that Ken Apple read this morning. And Jane talked about compassion at the Wonder Box. Compassion isn't pity. Pity is when we acknowledge someone's suffering. Compassion is not sympathy when we care that someone is suffering. Compassion is not even empathy when we feel another's pain. Compassion is, for me, an action word. It's about relieving suffering. And this is where the religion of Buddhism stands out as a giant among all the other world religions. Because Buddhism desires, most of all the Buddha, to alleviate suffering as a human condition, a lofty goal indeed. He was determined to give his followers tools that they needed to eliminate that mental, physical, and spiritual angst we all have. It is that angst that leads to wars. That angst is behind all of the social problems we have as a nation. Not feeling like I have enough, or there will be enough. I'm scared. People acting out of that angst. The great teachers, I think, realize this. They've been misunderstood and misquoted, but I think at their core they understood compassion, putting their faith and their understanding and their sadness into action to relieve suffering. That was Jesus' ministry too. He cried. My brother has died. And he relieved the suffering. He raised Lazarus, the story says. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted, he said. In Taoism, there are three pillars, basically, in Taoism: simplicity, patience, and compassion. Lao Tzu said that these three principles are the greatest treasures. World religions are full of compassionate stories because to be human is to share in the story of human suffering. So the etymology of this beautiful word, compassion, shows us that it is a very universalistic word. It's a UU word. The com, the C-O-M, of course, means with. And the passion in Latin, pati, means to suffer with, to suffer together. which brings compassion as a word into the empathy family. But for me, it's different from empathy because, as I stated, it also comes with the motivation to relieve another's pain or to relieve your own pain, to be compassionate with yourself. Can't forget that. Because isn't the world just, hurt people hurting people, people not being compassionate with themselves? So understanding your story and your hurts and why they're there is probably the most compassionate thing you can do. You will absolutely do less harm. Most people don't do that. Then we will be able to suffer with others authentically. Being compassionate is all about being in a relationship, being in right relationship with people. And the more we know about ourselves, the more we will allow ourselves to know about them. It's really a secret that's so obvious. It's like standing at the door knocking. It's so obvious. The more you're in relationship with yourself and forgiving with yourself, the more you can be in relationship with others and forgiving to them. It's magical. And that's why religion has been built on compassion. You cannot build a successful community without it, or relationship, or family, or anything. The wider we draw our compassionate circle, the more welcoming we become, until you finally realize it all is one. We evolve beyond tribalism and ethnocentrism toward a kind of pluralism. So the world is suffering today because of a lack of compassion, because we have not allowed ourselves to be in relationship with those who are unlike us. This is my only sermon. And I'm okay with that. And I come back to the word namaste. That's in Asian, Eastern philosophy, you bow and you say namaste. And then the person bows back to you. I see you, I see the divine in you, person. I bow back, I see the divine in you. It's a recognition of the inherent worth and dignity of that person. Very you to me. It's a sign of equality. The illusion of separation is the biggest issue on the planet. Now, in Eastern religion, they also teach that when you shed the ego self, you come to see humanity as just one organism. And this is trippy stuff, right? It's just like, I don't know, man. I can't get with this, I have a personality, yeah, but it's really just all of us. Like, that is the ultimate teaching in Eastern religion, by the way. There is no higher teaching. We are all one. Privilege and class and rank, the caste system, I preached about that, kind of hides this from us. And society does not see those with darker hues or less education as fully human. We've been blinded by the caste, by the hierarchy. And the crazy part is that 99.9% of us are alike. We're virtually the same. Many eyes, many complexions, many languages, genders, but all one humanity having 8 billion individuated experiences as one source of all. Esoteric, but the older I get, the more I understand it. And that's where epigenetics comes in. What? Some believe that some cultures are better because of the outcomes, right? Because of how we live, because of how we're educated, we're better. But those outcomes, good or bad, are the result of oppression or the lack of oppression. And epigenetics says that our environment shapes our health. You might be susceptible to a number of ailments based on your racial makeup, but humans are even more susceptible to disease and sickness, suffering, when they are treated as less than human, or feel a lack of safety, or they're forced to have poor diets or live in negative social environments. So the argument isn't whether it's nature or nurture, it's both. But there are no bad gene people. That's a myth. There are marginalized people who are suffering due to our collective apathy. Now, genes, scientists say, cut on or cut off, live, die, new cells are born, based on a number of things, including some hereditary factors, but mostly it is a matter of one's environment and how they are nurtured through their experiences and social relationships. That determines good health. People who have their Maslow needs met and are nurtured in protective communities live longer. They can now prove it scientifically. So things like high blood pressure and diabetes that are so prevalent in the Black community show conclusively to be the result of oxidative stress, trauma-induced illness that is indeed passed on through the genes, but I would like to say through generational trauma from slavery and oppression, and through continued toxic environments. Even those of us who escape to the suburbs, we still have the health risks because it's not just growing up or living in a rough neighborhood that traumatizes, but the entire system that wreaks havoc on the body. We've not been provided, marginalized Black, BIPOC communities, supportive reparations for many things because there's a lack of compassion. The masses, if they are not suffering with these elements, they do not feel it. It's not personal for them. And thus, the early death continues. The lack of interest or ignoring the problems or blaming the victims continues. And yet science is saying, change the environment, you change the health. It's in our power. It's not that they're bad and we're good. They've been treated bad. And their genes are responding to that. How can we become a compassionate activist? Well, you think about your own suffering. And you relate it to someone else who suffers. And then your spirit will compel you and show you where your work will be to alleviate suffering. To lighten it up a little bit, I will give you a few examples. The first is, did I look in my pocket? Nope, left it home. I left my allergy spray home. I have allergies. Really bad allergies. All my life. I could write a book on how to alleviate suffering for people with allergies. I have frequent sinus issues, and I'm sure it's related to my environment and where I grew up and the stress and city pollution. I don't know. But I have really bad sinuses. I'm allergic to everything except cats. So I have to stay up on top of my sinus flushes and, watch the barometric pressure. Anytime the weather turns from really hot to cold, look out. I'm probably going to have a bad day. So I can relate to someone who's going through the same thing. We can talk about it. We can give each other suggestions because it's personal. As a black man, I know my brothers and sisters' pain. I've experienced it. I live it. I know the trauma and the hurt in my community. I know the anger and the frustration. And I do my best with the tools that I have to try to alleviate suffering where I can, because it's personal. And I've learned to be compassionate being in an interracial marriage. I notice interracial couples everywhere. It's like when you buy a car and you see that car everywhere. Everywhere I go, I see interracial couples. And I don't know if it's because it's, there are more interracial couples today, or if I'm just seeing it. I think it's both. And I see an interracial couple and I look at them and I wonder, do they talk about race as much as me and Joni do? I wonder if they do. I wonder if they still get funny looks from people who don't really like the fact that we're together. I wonder if they get that too. I wonder if they talk about that. I wonder, when they go to the grocery store and you're standing in line and people get confused whether you're separate or together when they're trying to figure out the whole grocery thing. I think about that stuff. And then I think about that it was only 1967 that this kind of marriage was even allowed, by the way. 55 years ago, that's it. That's like almost in my lifetime. Hard to believe. But now I know all about Loving Day, and there's camps for interracial couples. I mean, this stuff, I just like, oh, there's a whole other world here. But what that did was it sort of opened my mind up to the idea of marriage. I'd never even thought about the sanctity or the sacredness of marriage and the right to marriage. I never thought about that stuff. I just took it for granted. But then, same-sex couples like, we want to get married, and I noticed it. Oh. And was an advocate for marriage equality, same gender-loving couples getting married in Maryland. With this church. In 2012 it passed. Because it was personal. And my daughter was born Kennedy, but she now asks to be called Ken. And I screw up regularly calling her by her birth name. She told me that she was pansexual. And I smiled and I said, okay. But I had to go look it up. Because I didn't know what it was. I mean, I knew what the G, B, L, T, Q, A, I. I knew all of those. But she added a P. And I'm heteronormative in my identity. I don't have to know. But my daughter stretched me, challenged me, corrects me often. And I'm not good at pronouns. I'm just being honest with you. But I'm growing and I'm getting better and better. I'm adapting my language, my understanding. Why? Because it's personal. It matters to me. You can't force something to matter for somebody. I know that. But you can educate yourself in such a way that the work will eventually find you. I'm compassionate today because life has taught me to be compassionate. And I think that's why the great religions embrace compassion. Compassion, like religion, binds us together. Religion means a sacred system of beliefs that bind us together. Compassion. What would happen if we brought together the best of the physical, mental, and social sciences with the best of ancient philosophy and spirituality to create a ministry inside and outside of our doors built on compassion? Oh, what a place that would be to go. to do good works together, to be our most authentic selves. What a cool place. That's exactly what we're trying to build in this congregation. And for my last sermon before my sabbatical in 2 weeks, I'm going to share with you again my personal vision for our beloved community. But let us not be naive. There are tyrants in the world. And I'm thinking again about the Ukraine. And I am sad and upset about this lack of care for other human beings. I am not shocked because as a black man, I've seen that lack of care in my own community. But I still am saddened and hurt and angry over any human suffering. I was out having lunch with a member, and John Fisher, who I got his permission just before church to say this, I said he was in the restaurant where we were, and he came over and talked, and I didn't know what was really up with the war in Ukraine. And John is a history buff, majoring in European history. He's a whiz. And he says it's all about wheat production. And so I go look it up, and I'm like, oh my God, the breadbasket of Europe. Oh, this is all about controlling resource. Oh, I understand what he's doing now. Even though I understand, I'm still angry because it's that old same narrative of taking by force. And it won't work. It's just temporary. Compassion works. Compassion is eternal because it's built on the enduring principle of love. As I close, I want you to remember that compassion is an action word. It calls us to see, do, and be. See, be, do. To see other people's lives and their struggles as we see our own. That we make it personal. That we actively participate in alleviating their pain. It asks us to be the change we wish to see in the world through our thoughts, words, and deeds. And it calls us to loving action, to do whatever we can to resolve pain and suffering that exists. Ken quoted George Washington Carver, the great African-American inventor, with the chalice lighting this morning, so I leave you with his words as I close. How far you go in life depends on your being tender with the young, compassionate with the aged, sympathetic with the striving, and tolerant of the weak and strong. Because someday in life, you will have been all of these. Amen.